Hello there. Welcome to the SPS podcast. In this episode, I'm very excited to do a performance origins deep dive with Dr. Corey Wilks. If you're a coach or if you've ever thought about becoming a coach, you might want to listen to this one because it's two coaches going backwards and forwards talking about a lot of different things, but this is a great episode, great conversation with Dr. Corey Wilks. Less than me talking about it, and let's get into the titles. Welcome to the SPS podcast, the Self-Performance Strategies podcast. Unlocking the secrets to success and unlocking the secrets to self-performance so you can improve mentally, emotionally, and physically. The SPS podcast is brought to you by the Pro Accelerator Program, helping business owners and business leaders save at least 10 working hours a week, improve their focus, and make more money. If that sounds like something you're interested in, check out the show notes and follow the links. But let's now jump into this episode. Hello. Welcome. We are in episode 45 of the SPS podcast. And in this episode, we're doing a performance origins deep dive with another creator. We've got Dr. Corey Wilks on. I met Corey through Twitter. We've hung out a few times on calls before. Corey's a psychologist who coaches creators and solopreneurs to reach their potential. He's got a lot of really cool opinions about the creator space. He's got some really great ideas. He's also a fellow Stoic, which I think we connected over the memento mori, and we'll talk about that in the episode as we dive into it. Corey, absolute pleasure. Dr. Corey, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
Dude, I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. We're gonna talk about your performance origins, how you got from where you were to where you are today, and we'll take the conversation in many other different directions. I really resonate with a lot of what you say on Twitter. I think we've got a lot of overlap with how we see coaching and maybe personal development in life in general. But the first question I ask all my guests when they come on, what is your personal self-performance philosophy? What is your definition of success if you want to make it a bit wider?
So, like you kind of talked about in the intro, I am a huge fan of specifically the Stoic concept of memento mori, right? And the way I think about success and how I define it, and I'll kind of tell us with a brief story. So a couple of years ago, I do martial arts, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So bumps, bruises, aches, and pains are super common. Yeah. A couple of years ago, I had what I thought was a bruise on my leg after a hard night of training. And, being an American, health insurance is a shit show. So the bruise got worse and worse until the point I was like, well, maybe it's a bone bruise. Oh, maybe it's a hairline fracture. Well, fuck it, I'll just walk it off, right? Because it's just, it's the kind of person I am. But after a couple of days, it got way worse, and it didn't look like a fracture. Went to the hospital, and basically they were like, hey, this is an infection. Here's some antibiotics. If it gets worse in the next 24 hours, come back. Well, within 24 hours, it had spread from basically my ankle to my knee, like this red spider vein looking shit. It looked horrible. Went back to the hospital, and they're like, yeah, this is a super bad infection. We're over capacity right now, so we can't transfer you to surgery. You have to wait. And they put me on an IV drip of antibiotics that I was unresponsive to. I sat there in that waiting room or in that hospital room for like 16 hours waiting to get transferred to surgery. All the while, they said, look, we're waiting for the test to come back, but if this infection has gotten into your bloodstream or your bones, you could die. Like, oh, wow. Full stop, you could fucking die. So, I thought I understood the Stoic concept of memento mori, and then I was like actually looking at my mortality. Like in my 30s. I was like, fuck me. Okay. So they finally transferred me to surgery. and they pull me off of the antibiotics. So I have nothing in my, no medication at this point, because they're like, look, you're not responding to anything. We have to wait for the surgeons to come in the morning. You're just going to sit here in this room, this hospital waiting room, until the morning. Still, test results hadn't come back. We had no idea how bad it was. And I remember like sitting in that bed by myself, because it was after visitor hours. So like it was just me, thinking, this could have been, like, I could die tonight or tomorrow.
Wow.
What if this had been my last week alive? Am I satisfied with how I spent my time? And to me, obviously, I lived, right? Spoiler alert, I'm fucking here. But to me, that is a right. To me, that is a much more powerful thought exercise than saying, well, what if I had a week to live? What if I had a month to live? Because if you know it's going to happen, you can plan it out, you can party it up, you can spend a bunch of money, go skydiving, do all this, random shit, vacation, whatever. It is much more powerful if you say, what if I've already lived my last 7 days? Because then you can only look back in retrospect, right? You can't change anything. All you can do is reflect. And to me, ever since then, I do that every single week, because as soon as you ask yourself that question, you can immediately pinpoint all the bullshit you allowed into your life, all the things you wanted to do that you let fear stand in your way of, all the things you took for granted, all the, you didn't call your parents because you're like, oh, I'll call them next week, or you didn't travel, you didn't talk to friends, you didn't start that new thing you've always wanted to do, right? We allow so much bullshit into our lives. We let so much fear and limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging behaviors and dumb shit, to quote you, stand in our way. So to me, success means getting to my deathbed and looking back on my life without regret. So everything I do revolves around maximizing that possibility. And I do that on a smaller basis of every week. I look back and I say, if this had been my last week alive, am I satisfied with how I spent my time?
I absolutely love that. And I am going to add that question to my weekly question list. I have 8-9 questions that I ask myself weekly. And one of them is like, what was the biggest struggle I faced? And I follow up with that with, if I was advising myself, giving myself that perspective. Again, a stoic, idea. Or perspective. And then the next question I ask is, if I don't take action this week, how is that going to make me feel? So I do the forward loss aversion, where you're doing the reverse loss aversion. So I'm going to add that in as my fourth question. I'm going to ask myself, if I don't take action, what's going to happen? And I'm going to follow up, am I happy with my last 7 days of action?
Good. So happy to help, man.
You're in the moment live changing my weekly review. Because I wrote that down. I'm like, that's because your story, everything else, powerful, and I'm like, that's a really good perspective shift, and I do enjoy a good perspective shift. So, that's a great big start. Swinging for the fences with the start. So we'll roll into that. That's really good, man. And so, as this is the performance origins and where you are today, and I know you just talked about, the playing with the idea of possibly dying, but you're a doctor, you're a psychologist, you've been on a journey. Where did that go? How did you end up where you are today? What was the barrier that got you, that took you down that route, that took you down that vocation, that got you to where you are? And then, how did you then turn into a successful creator who's been in and around like large communities and coached, as far as I'm aware, probably the I don't know if it's okay me saying, it's probably the biggest productivity YouTuber.
Ali's talked about it. Yeah, Ali Abdaal. Yeah,
Ali Abdaal. Yeah, you coach one of the biggest productivity YouTubers out there in on the space. A very smart dude that does that. So I want to unpack that with you today. The origins. How did it go? So let's go back 5 or 10 years. What was Mr. Corey Wilks doing before he became Dr. Corey Wilks?
Yeah, very good question. So I grew up, so I'll start with this. I grew up in rural Appalachia, like poor as fuck, food stamps, public housing. I remember one year we even got like a church donation of like for Thanksgiving, like turkeys and shit. And I remember like there's this quote by like Oprah. She was talking about how like when she was young, they were po. They were so poor they couldn't afford the R. And like I remember specifically when we got that church donation being like, fuck, we're po. We're like,
Yeah.
that's how little money we have. And you know, my parents both had issues that were beyond their control that kind of created those life circumstances. And I had a great upbringing, right? Like I love my parents. They did a lot for me. But I grew up super poor. And in my area, most people kind of stay poor a lot. And I remember my dad, he said, look, son, whatever you do as you grow up, use your brain, not your body. Because a lot of manual labor, you know, in my area,
Smart.
there's also a lot of addiction in my area because a lot of people did manual labor jobs. They got hurt. They got hooked on pain pills because they were prescribed. That whole like opioid epidemic thing, like that's where I'm from. So it was like, use your brain, not your body. So I really leaned into that growing up. I was a very cerebral kid, always, you know, thinking about things. And when I went to college, like that was like, oh, this is my ticket out of poverty. Like I'm going to educate myself out of poverty. And I was kind of undecided. I bounced around a lot with different majors. And then I had a required psychology class. It was psychology of either adult or child development, some developmental class. And it was like, oh, you know, with Dr. Hinton, I'm expecting this like old ass white dude where every time he talks, like chalk poofs out of his fucking armpits or something. And in walked this young black dude from Memphis. And his name's Dr. Keelan Hinton. To this day, one of the best motherfuckers I know. And the reason I went into psychology. So I always shout him out if I can. Keelan came in covered in tattoos. He talked like he was from Memphis, like he talked like a real motherfucker. He didn't speak professorially. He was just a real motherfucker. And the passion he had for psychology and the way he described psychology and how psychology fundamentally is about solving the human puzzle, right? Like helping people unwind and be more intentional with how they think and behave. Like that is all psychology is. It's just about thoughts and behaviors. And, you know, psychology is rooted in philosophies like Stoicism, very practical, can be anyway. So I changed my major to psychology that day because I loved it that much. So got the bachelor's, got the master's, got the doctorate, and I specifically focused on my doctorate's in clinical psychology. So I did therapy for a long time. And I specifically worked in integrated primary care, meaning I worked alongside physicians. When you would go to the doctor, they would also have you see me for anxiety, depression, addiction, whatever. And I specialized in addiction treatment.
Wow.
So once I get my doctorate, I'm like, cool, I got job security because I was working for what's called an FQHC, a federally qualified healthcare center. It just means a place that caters to people who are underinsured, poor, that kind of thing. So I am a doctoral level psychologist working in an area rampant with addiction, tons of poverty, and the place I work for specializes in treating poor people with addiction. I am a specialist in addiction treatment. There aren't a lot of psychologists. I'm not now. I wouldn't call myself that now, but at the time, I was a specialist in addiction treatment. And in an area with very few psychologists, let alone addiction specialists. I say that to say, I had the highest level of job security you can reasonably get, okay? There's a point to this. In 2020, I ended up moving to a different state because my girlfriend, she was getting her PhD, so we moved. I negotiated a remote telehealth position with that employer. So people didn't have to drive to the clinic. They could just roll out of bed or even just stay in bed and do therapy with me. It was great. 2 months into that new contract, I got an email from my boss who said, hey, you're fired. You have 30 days notice. So again, supreme job security. And I was like, what the fuck happened? They were like, nothing. You're a great employee. Everybody loves you. Your numbers are great. You get great results. But we're moving away from remote telehealth. Because you no longer live here, we can't pull you back into the clinic. So the way psychology licensure works in the U.S., I can be anywhere in the world, but you as my patient have to physically be in the state I'm licensed in during that call. You don't have to be a resident. You have to just have your 2 feet on that piece of fucking dirt, right?
Yeah.
So I'm licensed in the state of West Virginia, and I was living in Kentucky. I could not find another remote job out of West Virginia. I wasn't willing to move back because we just moved to Kentucky. And in order for me to get licensed in Kentucky would have taken 4 to 6 months just because of how backward the licensure process is. Yeah. So I was like, I've spent 12 years of my fucking life optimizing for this, and I can no longer do that job. So
that's a curveball.
Right? And like 30 days notice. Like I wasn't planning on this. I didn't have a fucking side hustle. I didn't it was completely blindsided, right? Yeah. And zero way to get another job really. So at that point I had, an identity crisis of who the fuck am I? What have I done with my life? But then I realized I was burnt out at that point anyway. There were a lot of things I wanted to do, but I had so many limiting beliefs about my ability to do them. Mm-hmm. So I took the month of December 2020, because December 4th, 2020 was my last day as an employee. And I learned as much as I could. Like I took that month. I'm like, I'm going to figure shit out. So I ended up becoming certified as an executive coach because I had a lot of like stigma around life coaching because there's zero qualification to be a life coach. But I read this article by the American Psychological Association because like all through grad school, like we would talk mad shit about life coaches, right? Because well, we're psychologists, we're better than everybody, we're elitist and shit. But this article was like, yeah, coaching is unregulated. Like it's a fucking Wild West right now.
It is.
But that means if you have a solid foundation in mental health or just human psychology, you can join the coaching discipline and improve the quality. I was like, oh, that makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
So one of the guys that was quoted in it, Dr. Jeffrey Auerbach, he runs the College of Executive Coaching. I went through that, loved it. And the main thing that the coaching training did, because again, I had a doctorate, I knew most of the shit. The main thing it helped me do was make the mental shift from a pathology model to a wellness model. Because with clinical psychology defines wellness as the absence of illness. But just because you're not sick doesn't mean you're healthy, right? Yeah. My job as a therapist was not to help you be happy or be fulfilled or whatever. It was to help you become subclinical, to make it to where you no longer warranted a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, single episode mild. And then insurance would drop you because they're like, hey, they're good. They don't need therapy. Coaching allowed me to because therapy is largely about taking somebody from dysfunction to functioning.
Yeah.
Coaching largely is about taking somebody who already functions pretty well and helping them flourish, thrive, optimize, 100%. Whatever you want to do, right? Yeah. So that allowed me to really lean into a lot of the strengths I had cultivated, but I wasn't allowed to capitalize on.
Yes.
Right? I knew all kinds of shit, but I literally wasn't allowed to do it as a therapist, right? So that it helped me change my mindset. I also learned a fuck ton about like business because again, I grew up poor. I didn't know entrepreneurs. I didn't know how to start an LLC or how to do copywriting or set up a landing page or develop a website. Like I didn't know any of that shit. I taught myself all of it. And there are some people like, a lot of the people you and I know helped a lot. Like, shout out Dan Coe all day, every day. Like Dan was instrumental to me specifically. Yeah. Early on, like Dan was fucking great. Love Dan. Great dude. Definitely follow his shit if you don't already.
Yeah.
But that was it. Like I literally, I started professional Twitter, started meeting a bunch of kick-ass fucking people and learning from other entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, creators, writers.
We met because of Dan Coe.
Yeah, like it's so much shit, right? And like that's what I'm saying, because like I came from poverty, and I tried to educate myself out of it, and then I got blindsided by when I thought I had supreme job security, but it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because that forced me to face the reality that I was unsatisfied with the life I had built. And the future that the path I was on at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Because like one of the guys I worked with, he was a physician. Motherfucker made $500K and hated his fucking life.
Yeah.
And it was just like, obviously, like as a psychologist, I was never going to hit 500K. I wasn't going to make, maybe a fifth of that as just like a therapist. But
Yeah.
that was the environment that I was in of like, are you really trying to do this for 40 years so that you can enjoy the weekends and then retire at 65 and then maybe enjoy the last 15 years of your life? Like that was the path I was on, and I was supremely burnt out, supremely unsatisfied. So getting fired was one of the best things that happened to me, even though I didn't feel like it at the time, because the like no shit, the life I used to daydream about having is my day-to-day reality now. Like I get to sit in my fucking pajamas and write, hang out with kick-ass people like you, like motherfucker. I'm in pajamas right now. Like I got like an okay shirt on, but like I'm in pajama pants right now, right? Like that's my life. I get to write. I get to create courses. I get to coach cool people. I get to share my ideas. I get to use my brain, not my body, as my dad said. That is my day-to-day life now. And it wouldn't have been had I not been fired. Maybe I would have slowly done the side hustle thing, and maybe, but who knows?
Yeah, so many things to unpack, and that's such a great story. I love your dad's wisdom, because you brought that back. You sort of called back to that. Use your brain, not your body. That's such a it's a really good piece of advice. But the getting fired, the 30 days, just having that reality shoved in your face. And I think, while we're very different stories, we have similar kind of experiences. I didn't get fired from corporate, but I could feel the pressure of corporate. I had a fear of I don't want to wake up in my 50s and be like, oh, I've got 765 days left until I'm retired, or whatever they say when they're in their late 50s or early 60s. I didn't want to count down my life to go play golf, whatever that is. I want to have a life where I can play golf now on a Tuesday morning. I love that, because I felt that pressure. That's why one of the reasons I left corporate. It's just that I think I waited too long. I had that sense I could do more, but where you got that shoved in your face, I think it took me a few years of being chipped away. I had the idea, I was getting paid six figures, COVID hit, and I ended up following that dream. So, good story. But the one thing I do want to go back to on that, just relating to my own journey, but the one thing I want to talk about is the difference between therapy and coaching. You talked about this idea of therapy is bringing somebody to a level where they can function again, but yet coaching is taking somebody to the next level. I've come across that in my own opinion, but I'm hearing it from an actual psychologist and therapist. I'm like, wow, because that's what I just want to quickly go back to that. And you said you were handcuffed. How frustrating was that for you to have this sort of like bigger mindset, and you can see the potential in somebody, but literally the medical system is saying to you, no, you actually can't talk to somebody in that way?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The caveat with this, right, is for American healthcare, like in insurance, right? If you are in a more affluent area and you can pay out of pocket for private practice kind of therapy, then they have a lot more leeway. Maybe they can help you do more, but that is a rarity. Yeah. Because at that point you're not really doing therapy at that point. They're actually probably more so doing coaching without realizing they're coaching. Yeah. Because therapy, by definition, is about addressing what's called psychopathology, which is just mental illness. That's just what we call it. We call it psychopathology. So from where I worked under insurance, if your insurance didn't cover the treatment and you couldn't afford to pay out of pocket for just, whatever, you had to quit seeing me, right? And that was a really frustrating thing because, one, from where I specialize in addiction treatment, the majority of people I worked with were struggling with addiction. And that's one of those things where, like, you definitely need to have that shit under control before you can really do anything else. Yeah. But even with other people I would work with, they, like, I remember some of my favorite people to work with, we worked, 6 months or a year to the point where they were no longer depressed or they no longer had anxiety that was debilitating. And they were right at that threshold of finally building the life that they wanted to build. But at that moment, it was like, see ya, can't help anymore, right? And like, I remember watching people, like, helping them reconstruct their identity to become the person they always wanted to be, or like, people who they were in a shitty marriage for 15 years. And then, since they were like 16 or 18, finally came out of it. And they were like, who the fuck am I? I don't know who I am. I've always been the wife. I've always been the this and that.
Yeah.
And we worked through all that. And then they're like, I finally know who I am, know who I want to be, and I'm ready to become that person. And then it's just like, well, we got to terminate therapy because I can't figure out a diagnosis to slap on you. So
yeah, you're fixed.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was so fucking frustrating, man. Like it was so bad. But the thing is like, I at least knew enough because I always wanted to be a writer. I just never thought I would be able to be one really. So like, I remember like I would look up, like I would study a little bit of writing. I would follow entrepreneurs online and shit. So like, I knew that there was more out there versus a lot of my colleagues who they were like, this is all I'm ever going to do. This is all and some of them, they love doing it. Others don't love doing it. They're so, it's a strong word, but they're so indoctrinated to that path that they can't see another way out.
Yeah. They're fish in water.
Yeah. And I've even had a couple people like, cause most of the people that like I went to school with or I used to work with, we don't talk anymore. Largely because, and you'll get this, because I told my girlfriend about this the other day. Talking shop, in air quotes, talking shop with, like in academia, with professors and things, so I used to teach, revolves around talking, just bitching about bureaucracy. Talking shop in therapy is mostly just bitching about insurance. So all the people that I used to hang out with, colleagues and shit, all we would do, like our relationship was predicated on bitching about insurance and all the headaches of therapy.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship, talking shop in entrepreneurship is energizing as fuck because it's like, oh, have you tried this? Oh, this is what's working for me. Like, oh, what's your idea? Like, oh, what's your plan for that? Like, it's so collaborative. It's so fucking like, dude, it's so positive and uplifting. It's totally fucking different.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure like with corporate shit, I'm sure it was a similar thing of like, it's just bitching.
When I worked in sales, it was bitching about lack of clients or bitching about other salespeople or bitching about the commission amounts. Or when I worked in insurance, it was again, bureaucracy. It was bitching about what we had to do. It was just complaining. It's like, I remember going to barbecues and events and everybody who worked would be in one room talking shop. And then everybody who didn't, the wives or people who didn't work in that organization were in the other room, and it'd be like we were taught they were all talking English and we were in the other room talking Japanese or something, because it's just like people don't understand that because we're using all the short terms and all the acronyms and all the corporate BS, and I hated that shit.
Exactly.
It's so negative. It just keeps you trapped in this sort of the old crab trying to escape the bucket. No.
Exactly.
Come on,
back. Just come back.
Come back. Get back in the bucket.
Yeah, and another thing that I realized, though, is, I'm a huge proponent of, I want my existence to inspire other people to embrace their own authenticity, right? Like, I want to embrace my own authenticity and live that so much that it gives other people permission to embrace their own, right? So I'm not saying like, you got to accept me for all my flaws, like none of that kind of toxic narrative bullshit, but like, because I'm obviously trying to be better every day, but I try very hard to accept who the fuck I am and be comfortable with that, right? Rather than try to play status games or be who I think people want me to be, conform to shit. So I've learned the more I do that, now, occasionally I'll get like a former colleague or a former professor or somebody else. They'll reach out and be like, hey, I love what you're doing. I've been thinking about doing something similar. I've been thinking about leaving therapy. I've been thinking about leaving academia, but I don't know how. Right. And I'm seeing like a mass exodus specifically around therapists wanting to go into coaching or doing something else because of all the bullshit. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of people in general moving toward coaching.
Yeah. I mean, again, I relate to my stories. You came up through coaching, through being a therapist and sort of that angle. I came up through leadership. I loved leadership, and when I was in my early 20s and I was like, well, how do you make money? Well, you become a leader and then you become a regional manager and you climb the corporate ladder. So I had an affinity with leadership, but part of leadership is actually getting the most out of your team, and getting your most out of your team means you actually have to be able to explain why they're doing something and understand your team members and actually make them feel comfortable and give them the tools, the skills, knowledge, and abilities for them to actually take action. And the more that I led people, the better the results I got. It kind of linked back to because my team knew exactly what they had to do, and I removed barriers for them mentally, emotionally, physically within work for them to actually get the shit done, so to speak. So I had a different kind of aspect. People like I started my team, the team that I had in sales. Some of them started calling me coach. This is back in 2014, 15, and that's what the idea was. That, oh, this is a good idea. And then when I went into corporate, and then I was doing the whole leadership thing, I loved running projects, getting a small team of people, and going towards something. But then you always had the 25-year or the 20-year plus person who was anti everything, and then you had the other managers who didn't like this sort of like pirate crew that I was running, or the sort of we're trying to disrupt things or whatever that is. And it's all this negativity, it's all this like corporate bureaucracy bullshit that you had to then deal with this like negativity all the time. And I just got to the point where I felt myself changing in those environments to like fit in that, so that and it was bullshit. And that's one of the reasons why I left, because when you're coaching somebody, when someone hires me and someone hires you, or you're working with somebody within your programs, they're there because they want to be changed. There is no like, oh, we've done this before this way, so we're not going to do it. You don't get that when you're coaching somebody. But when you're in corporate and you're trying to coach a lot of people, you get a certain percentage of people that just want to bring everything down, that want to stop everything. And that's the bullshit that I was faced with. And again, one of the reasons why I left is because I was bored with the 20, 30, 40% of people who just fought everything. It was frustrating.
That, and yeah, because like I remember, like I won't go into like all the details, but like I remember like when I had my therapy job, there's like this one super cumbersome workflow that we were told we had to do. Mm-hmm. And it was like it took a fuck ton of time. It didn't actually help. Like it was basically like there was an automation that we had to undo because it would have sent out letters to everybody, and we didn't want that. And everybody was like, yeah, just we have to like go through and like take an extra like however many, minutes to like undo this automation to cancel it. I'm like, can't we just like remove the automation? They're like, no, we can't do that. So I just emailed tech support base. I was like, can you all just remove this automation? They're like, oh yeah, done. Took 30 seconds. And and everybody was like, we never thought of that. You never thought that to question the fucking status quo and be like, hey, this shit doesn't work. Let's change it. Like, dude, nobody fucking thought that way. And I was like, I am not one of you. And I don't want to be one of you. Right?
Yes. No, but yes. Yeah, I'm like, yes. That's exactly the same. It was like this. I felt like towards the end of my corporate career that I was Sisyphus pushing this rock up a hill. Because I kept asking, is there a better way? Why are we doing this? Why is that? And this curiosity or this sort of like, I describe myself as tactically lazy because I don't want to have 5 meetings about this fucking process. I want to have one. So I want to make sure there's an agenda. I want to make sure everybody's in the meeting. I want to make sure it's not a waste of time because I don't want to be back here again next Tuesday. And that kind of like pushback, actually, I got a lot of pushback back on me because I was pushing back on the norm, and I felt like I was, maybe I was a bit grumpy, and I can get a bit arrogant, sorry, but I felt that sort of pressure of just like, lessons learned. Well, why don't we start with the lessons learned when we start with a new project? And no one ever seems to do that, and I'm like, why the fuck are we doing this? It's like it's repeating the same stuff over and over again and getting the same results, sort of. So I totally empathize or resonate or feel that it's just you're right. I felt different, and I think that's when I realized I am not. Maybe I am an entrepreneur. And
well,
that's a big question to ask yourself.
Yes, and I think that a related thing to that is, I think the reason people act that way is a salary. Right? Like I remember like in my job, like for our industry, we all had the highest salaries in the area. I had negotiated, I was the 3rd highest paid psychologist in at my job. The only 2 people who got paid more than me were the 2 directors. And the only reason I didn't get paid more is because they fucking sucked at negotiating. Otherwise, I'd have been making more. But literally, like the COO was like, I can't pay you more than your bosses, so this is what we're paying you. And I was like, motherfucker. But we were all salary. Like, dude, like, no lie. We had the exact same meeting, almost verbatim, 3 months in a row. Because it was like, we're paid to have this meeting. We don't have to get shit done. We can talk about the same thing over and over again. I was like, but we could solve this and move the fuck on. They're like, no, our whole morning, like from 8 to noon, we're free for this meeting. And if we end too soon, then they won't give us more time for a meeting next time. So we have to take the full 4 hours. And I was like, no. And like, that's what I think a lot of people who move to entrepreneurship realize is like, I don't want to have to work 40 hours just to run out the clock. If I work 40 hours, if I work 60 or 80 hours, it's because I'm doing something I fucking love that is making a difference, and I'm moving the needle every second I'm doing something. Yes. Right? And not like hustle culture shit, but like actually like the shit you're doing matters. You're not just there killing time. You're not just there, well, I get paid the same regardless, right? That was the other thing I realized was like, no matter how good I am at therapy, no matter how much I help people, no matter how many people I see, largely, I get paid the same as a motherfucker literally reading out of a fucking manual next door who doesn't know anything about what the fuck they're doing. Like, me and that motherfucker get paid the same or almost the same? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Right?
But,
And one of the takeaways I want to highlight for anybody listening who either is a coach or specifically you're thinking about becoming a coach, because coaching is a really easy just entry point into entrepreneurship, I think.
It is.
That nobody starts from zero. Mm-hmm. A lot of people because I get these questions a lot, and that's why I create a course around it. But like a lot of people are interested in coaching, or at least learning how to coach. Because some people want to do like internal coaching, like for their company. Yeah. Other people want to start their own company, their own coaching thing, or as a side hustle, whatever. But a lot of people think that they don't have any pre-existing skills to bring to the table. Okay, I didn't know how to coach, but I had a therapy background. Meaning I had a background in understanding and changing human behavior. Yeah. Right. Granted, it was from a therapy perspective, but I wasn't starting at zero because I understood human psychology. Yeah. I just had to apply my pre-existing skills, adapt them to this new thing. You came from a corporate background. You came from a sales background, from a leadership background, right? You weren't starting at zero either. No. Right? It was all about translating these skills, seeing which of the things you had already cultivated would apply to this new endeavor. So if you're thinking about doing coaching, whatever the fuck kind, realize no matter what, you are not starting at zero. There is something from your previous life, jobs, personal life experiences, your own philosophy, right? Because I pull a lot from Stoicism, for example. Yeah. Like, you're not starting from zero. There's plenty of shit already that you can pull from right out the gate as you start coaching.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, my coaching model is or my me as a coach comes from like a number of different pillars. You know, obviously I've got my corporate project management kind of pillar. You know, I think of things in like 90-day sprints, and I got all that from corporate, thinking about like little mini stretches and mini sprints, or mini programs and things I was on. My leadership background got me into coaching, and I'm like, well, how do I, quote unquote, manipulate my team to get the right results? In a sense, manipulate might be the wrong word, but I was very results driven early on in my career. It was like, well, I want to get promoted, I want to get more commission, so it's results driven. But how do you make those results easy? You make it easy for people to get those results. And then I think where my final pillar comes from is the fact that I did a lot of dumb shit in my life. I partied hard from like 18, 19 to 28, 29. I took, name it, I probably had it in a club listening to techno, reaching for the lasers. But I don't do that anymore. But like the self-leadership, the self-discipline, the emotional journey, the spiritual work, the inner work, I had to do all of that myself. Read all the books, do all the meditating. But the funny thing is, when you combine that skill stack, it's a pretty fucking good skill stack for helping solopreneurs and business owners get shit done and do less dumb shit. And that's what I do. So it's like I'm a coach because of my previous 15 years. Not because I woke up 2 years ago and decided to be a coach. No,
exactly.
I'm a better coach over the last 2 years from coaching 20 plus odd people one-on-one. Yes, 100% I am, because I'm learning. But I didn't wake up 2 years ago and be like, hell, I'll just decide being a coach. That's just not how it happens.
Exactly. And like, even like, I said, I did therapy, underserved area, all this other shit. I did like brief therapy, meaning I did therapy for like a half hour versus like an hour
Yeah.
sometimes people do. Because again, I worked in healthcare. What that meant was I was working with people who didn't have access to much at all. So I couldn't say, oh, you have anxiety here, buy this fancy fucking gadget or go on a vacation or whatever the fuck bullshit, right?
Yeah.
These motherfuckers didn't have money a lot of times. So what I did, I got really good at being super concise, finding the most effective strategy that would work for somebody regardless of their financial means. Right? Because shit that works for rich people doesn't work for poor people, but shit that works for poor people does work for rich people, right? Right? Like to oversimplify it, right?
Yeah.
So I got really good at that. I got really good at what's called motivational interviewing, which basically just means finding the leverage point that gets somebody to take action, to jump off what's called the fence of ambivalence. Ambivalence is basically when you know you need to take action, but for whatever the fuck reason, you haven't yet. Motivational interviewing, which is a pillar coaching / therapy skill, is just about helping people get off that fence and actually take action, right? So I got really good at that because I consistently work with people who didn't have a goddamn thing, wanted to make changes but didn't know how or just weren't willing to yet. That was really what I specialized in helping people do that. So then when I start coaching people are like, holy shit, man, how have I, like, you're like, to toot my own horn for a second, they're like, damn, you're really good because we get so much shit done in one session or in 1 month's worth of coaching. I'm like, yes, because I spent 15 fucking years, 12, 15 fucking years specializing in learning how to fucking do this with a different population. But again, that foundational skill set is the same.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that so much because I get all my one-on-one clients when they come in. I get them to do 7 exercises before the first call that we have. So it's not like we just jump on a call and we're talking bullshit. But those 7 exercises are literally I've had clients who've, hey, I'm working with you for 6 months. I'm like, cool. I've unblocked their main issue before they even get on the first fucking call.
That's awesome.
Or have highlighted it. And then I go deep with it for a couple of sessions. And then I'm able to go on to different things. But it's not like I just pulled those 7 exercises out of my ass. It's because those 7 exercises, a bit like you were put into a situation. I was put into situations in my personal life or with teams. Well, how do I get buy-in early on? How do I get buy-in from the start? And that's where I come at things. Is because you can't, unless the person has personal buy-in, especially when I come from corporate and I have to go back to that 20, 30, 40% who are anchored. If I can't get them bought in, they're just going to be a problem from the start. So how do I actually get those people involved early on? And that's where I come at things. I always look at things where, like, and I don't this idea that when I'm going to do something, I don't think about if I'm talking to the early adopter or I'm talking to an innovator. I don't frame the conversation. I then think about if I'm talking to the person that's probably going to say no if I mention it to the idea, how do I then mention it in a way that person is thinking maybe yes? Because if I can get that person to think maybe yes, these people over here on the other side of the scale who are already yeses are going to be like yeses anyway, but they're going to be more of a yes, if that makes sense. And the maybes might be a yes, where the no might be a maybe. I'm trying to shift that across. So that's where I think sometimes when it comes to my coaching or exercises or when I'm trying to come up with a new idea, I'm like, okay, if I'm like a stubborn bitch ass motherfucker who doesn't want to do anything, how can I create something? How do I approach that person with this idea so they get it? And I think it leads to me to be more simple, more direct, and make people connect with the exercises. So I think we've again kind of got similar experiences, but coming from completely different fields.
Well, that and like it's all about the giving it the right context and framing, right? I always assume because like I'm a skeptical motherfucker, so because there's a lot of bullshit out there.
Yeah.
There just is, right? And like, so I assume whoever I'm talking to, whether that is going to be a client or my ideal reader when I'm coming up with an article or a video or something, I assume they're going to be skeptical too. So how do I differentiate this or frame it in a way that bypasses that skepticism because and separates it from all the woo-woo bullshit, right? Because like I was talking about this the other day, like with the creator economy, like I and primarily now I focus on creators and solopreneurs, which a lot of solopreneurs are also creators, so it's a thing. But in the creator economy space, there's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of like this fucking circle jerk shit of I'm a writer who specializes in helping writers write. I'm a YouTuber that teaches you how to grow a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm a
okay, but have you? I'm a Twitter growth specialist who teaches you how to grow your Twitter. Yeah, like I'm a ghostwriter. You got 3 followers. Okay, maybe calm down. Yeah. Like it's that, right? And you know, some of those people are legit, cool, but there's a lot of people who aren't. Yeah. I am in the creator economy space. I'm a creator who helps creators reach their potential. How do I make sure that isn't a fucking circle jerk or a grift? Yeah. Or like, how do I make sure that I never get associated with those motherfuckers because I'm not those motherfuckers, right? Yeah. And like that's all part of this, right? Is being aware of that. So I assume somebody's gonna be skeptical. I'm assuming a motherfucker's gonna be like, oh, Corey talking about reaching your potential. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, whatever, right? Yeah. So it's like, I got to make sure you know right off the fucking bat that I'm a no bullshit motherfucker. So whatever the fuck I'm telling you, I deeply fucking believe, and you can believe that it's trustworthy. How do I do that? Right? That is how I approach every fucking piece of content I put out.
and that goes back. I have very similar thoughts because there's not an exercise that I teach a client that I don't use myself or I haven't used in my past and got results from it and then moved past it as a person. But everything that I use, I'm like, I've gone through it myself. I have used this or I still use it. Like I have a coaching 90-day sprint program that I give to my clients. I use it every 90 days myself because it's good. It works. But yeah, so I 100% the same. I'm one of those people. It's like the old like you're a fitness coach, but you're overweight. You're a ghost writer, but you have no social media following. You're a performance coach, but your performance sucks. Like I'm a performance coach in a sense. I help entrepreneurs, solopreneurs do less dumb shit, make more money. You know, primarily I go after time because I think that's the big lever. If you have more free time, you have more opportunity to expand your freedom of money, freedom of relationship, freedom of purpose. But it all starts with time. If you don't have time, you can't. If your time's already taken up with lots of bullshit, you can't make more money. You can't have more freedom of relationship. You can't do the things you want to do unless you sort your fucking time out. So that's my big domino. I go back to self-performance, improve your self-performance, improve your freedom of time. Then we go after everything else.
Well, that's memento mori, man. You get a finite amount of fucking time. Then you die.
Then you die. Exactly. So that's where I go with that. But in my own life, that question that you said at the start of the podcast about, am I happy with the last 7 days? I felt that because I was like, I'm not 100% happy with my last 7 days. All right, now speaking to you, when I used that question, I went through my head and, oh, fuck, I'm not happy. So
it's a hard question to ask, man.
It's a hard question to ask. And I was like, damn. Because I'm like, that needs to be, I can't feel like that. But I put a lot of pressure on myself to actually get up at between 5 and 6 to meditate, to go out for walks, to do my journaling, to produce content, to actually be fit and healthy, to maintain a decent weight, to go to exercise classes, to play soccer. I do all these things to get out in nature, to do all that stuff, because peak results come from peak rest. And you need that peak rest, you need the peak discipline, the peak structure to actually create the exciting things in life. So I like to see myself, to go to your point, as a living embodiment of what I coach. And a part of that, at a certain point, I want to help people directly, because you started off with the coaching thing. I want to you're helping people become coaches. I want to show people maybe how to like scale a business at some point. But I'm not there as a coach yet to do that because I'm still scaling my business. But I would never dare coach somebody on how to scale a business until I had successfully scaled my own business to a level that I think is sufficient, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
But when it comes to self-performance, done that, got that, been 6-figure roles, already got a 6-figure coaching business. You know, I've done the self-performance stuff, got that wrapped up, and I'm a living embodiment of that, so I coach that. Obviously, there's room for improvement, always. But yeah, no, I really connect with that. And you know, I think I've only ever asked you one question, and we've been talking for 40 minutes, maybe 2 questions. But
when two coaches talk to each other, it's a good conversation. Go ahead.
It's very illuminating. I've already got some gold out of it on my notes for myself. selfishly, one of the reasons why I have a podcast, if anybody listens to this, I like talking to people. Everybody who's been on my podcast, I'm like, I want a conversation with that person. And that's one of the primary reasons why I invite them on. But the question I want to go now, if I could give you a realistic but magic wand right now, where would you like to take your current business? I know you've got a creator course, you're already coaching people, you've got a lot going on. What's the future for Corey and his as a creator, as a coach? Where would you like to be the next 12 to 18 months with your brand or everything that you're doing?
So, solid question. It's a classic coaching question, right? Yeah. Because it removes all obstacles and limiting beliefs. So my current plan, because I already think about this. So I have been doing one-on-one coaching, right? And I turned my coaching frameworks into a curriculum for a 5-week live cohort-based course, right? I've run 2 cohorts of it. It's called Intentional Life Design. Getting ready to, whenever the fuck this airs, getting ready to do a 3rd cohort. And then separate from that, I have like a self-paced coaching course because everybody kept asking me, how do I become a coach? So I was like, I'm tired of answering all these questions. Let me just throw everything I've learned of how to be a world-class coach into a single fucking course, right? Yeah. So that is the most recent thing. Like, I didn't start by creating a course to teach coaches how to coach, or like that circle jerk. Like this was like by demand, I did it. Yeah. So my next thing is, so I love CBCs, right? I love cohort-based courses. Yeah. I run mine, honestly, like group coaching at a larger scale. Because most CBCs are very just like info dump heavy. They just throw a bunch of information at you.
A few of those, yeah.
Yeah. Mine is more group coaching in that we prioritize taking action over taking notes. Like, that's one of the taglines they use for it, right? Because because with coaching, if you're doing group coaching, one of the primary ways of effective group coaching is you give a prompt or you teach a very brief concept, and then you basically throw it back at people like, what are your thoughts on this? How can you apply this? And then you let them apply it to their own lives, right? Yeah. That's how I developed the curriculum for the CBC. It's largely facilitation and not lecture. Yeah. And people get great results from it. And for me as a coach, that allows me to impact way more people versus one-on-one coaching. It's also just more effective for my time, right? Like, I can spend 2 hours basically coaching 50 people, or I can spend the same 2 hours coaching one person at a time, right? Yeah. The issue I have with CBCs is if you're not in the launch window, nobody can sign up. Yeah. Right. And I've learned I fucking hate launches. I hate everything about a launch. Like, I fucking hate all of it. Right. All the uncertainty, all the time commitment, all the building the assets and the workflows shit. Yep. I fucking hate all of it. Right. So I'm doing it for this 3rd cohort of Intentional Life Design. But my plan moving forward is to create a membership community. Yeah. And I know those, more and more people are doing those for good reason. My main things are, with my CBC, it's 5 weeks, right? If I think of something that I think would be really cool for the CBC, I have to say, is this better than what I already have in it? Because they have a finite amount of sessions and content I can put into everything, right? Yeah. So for me to add something new means to take something else out. I can't really do extra workshops or have fireside chats or bring in kick-ass people like you to come talk to the community. I can't do that right now because it's 5 weeks, whatever. But with the community, I have way more leeway to do that, right? Yeah. So my plan long-term, one, I'm writing a book to turn the concepts of intentional life design into a book. But then the community, I'm going to take what was the CBC, and this is the plan. I'm going to take what was the CBC and make that the onboarding process for the community that is all around reaching your potential as a creator, solopreneur, or entrepreneur, I guess, by building again, I hate the term, but it's the most appropriate one I can use, by building a fulfilling life and business, right? Yeah. By basically clarifying your core value, identifying and overcoming the obstacles that prevent you from building a life aligned with that value, creating goals that progressively move you closer to it, and just how do you achieve those, right? Like that's the CBC, that's what the book's going to be, and the community, that'll be the onboarding process. But then from there, it's like, here's everything else that will help you on that journey to reaching your potential, to building a more values aligned, fulfilling life and business, right? Workshops, trainings, fireside chats, other things.
Yeah.
That allows me to have this primary offering that everything else kind of feeds into. I can throw all of my time and effort primarily into building this and getting people to that, right? People can join it 24/7, 365 because it's an open membership community, right? Like you can apply, like you can join anytime, not just with this limited launch window.
Yeah.
And that to me allows me to have the impact I want to have, because I'm very dedicated to helping creators reach your potential. And this is, to me, the best path forward to do that, because now you have a network of other people, all this other shit. So magic wand / my actual concrete plan over the next 8 to 12 months, that's what it is.
Love it. That community idea has been on my mind for so long as well, and I keep circling around it. I want to help people at scale. I love coaching people one-on-one. I love what it's done for my mentality. I love I love the experience, I'm lucky enough to actually some multi-millionaire, multi-businesses doing 7-figure clients over the last sort of 6 months that I've been like so grateful to I've had the chance to hang out with them essentially and help them. But at the same time, that community is just I fucking love helping people. I love being on calls. I love getting results from people, and it's so weird. We'll probably talk about this off podcast, but I get so caught up in like usually the launch bullshit. I just get so stuck in it, where it's easy for me to do the one-on-one, the book a call with me marketing, because there's no launch sequence, there's no emails. It's just, as you say, my one-on-one coaching program is just a constant. It's available all the time. It's on my website, it's on my emails. I put it in my threads. I talk about it on the timeline. You know, people sign up to book a call with me in calendar. It's just there 24/7, 365. Digital 24-hour shop. If you land on my profile, there it is. But when it comes to launching a community, there's that whole like, oh, I've got to do the emails, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, it's got to be a lot. Well, nobody shows up. Is this the right thing I want to do? And it just, man, I'm on the edge of it, and I keep not doing it, and it's funny. But I love where you're going with that, and I wish you all the success. And I know your cohort has already been successful. I think you've had a bunch of people through there already. You've got a great side program as well. So I really hope that community thing works for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And one more thing to tack on this. Again, going back to, don't do dumb shit, right? I'm a huge fan of, if you want to be successful, do what successful people do, right? Because they've figured out what works. Now, yes, you have to adapt it to your own situation, but I look at, like, again, going back to Dan Coe, the shit he's doing with Modern Mastery, like, his community, brilliant. Great. All kinds of shit, right? Love it. Highly, definitely check it out. Jay Klaus, he has the lab, the Creator Science Lab, yes, right? And that's his own membership community. Paul Millard, who has a book called The Pathless Path, which is basically his journey from being like a McKinsey level consultant or McKinsey consultant doing all the corporate shit to like blazing his own trail and like creator economy type shit, right? Yeah. It's a book that a lot of people read, and they're like, damn, Paul, like, I wish you had a community of people who were also on this quote unquote pathless path, right? Like you abandon the default path and you go onto this path that doesn't really have a set of rules, right? So Paul created his own called Find the Others. So looking at like, well, how does Dan, structure Modern Mastery? How does Jay structure the lab? How does Paul do Find the Others? Like, what of what they're doing would I love to do myself? Am I willing to do myself? That works with my own core value of freedom and the way I want to spend my time, and is structured in a way that is as valuable as possible to the type of people I want to serve. Yeah. Looking at how other people are already doing it has been super, super helpful to give me ideas of how I want to structure my own long term.
No, Dan Coe's Modern Masteries was definitely a thing for me. I'm in a number of other people's as well. Ship 30 was one that illuminated me with Nicholas Cole and Dickie Bush, which I thought was fantastic. They gamified it in such a way that hooked me in. Or I like that. I know you've done David Perel's
Rite of passage.
Rite of passage.
Rite of passage. I think they're moving toward more of a pseudo membership model, but it's currently still mostly a CBC with some membership on the side. They'll probably, honestly, it seems like they're moving toward that direction, because I know Tiago Forte of Building Second Brain, I know they've moved to more of a membership model where, like, I think like within the membership there are like cohorts every so often, so like you're in the membership and that gives you access to, I don't know fully how they've done it, but more and more people are moving toward that. Either memberships or packaging it up as self-paced, because I think Ali Abdal with Part-Time YouTuber Academy, they're getting ready to do their final live cohort of PTYA. And then they're going to move, I think, toward like a self-paced version that then you can add on basically a year of like almost like a community support mastermind sort of help as well. So I'm seeing a lot of people move away from the pure CBC model into other like membership / self-paced mastermind groups.
I love that. That model, I love that. That's the thing. It's again, it's the behavioral economics. It's the friction point that stopped me, because I personally, if you put a gun to my head, as somebody who came from knowledge assets in corporate, that's where my last couple of years was teaching classes in corporate, and onboarding new people and taking them through like a learning journey. It is literally that, a learning journey, the information dump. The 2-week come learn how to be a great leader in 4 weeks. No, that's bullshit. You can't learn how to be a great leader in 4 weeks. You can get great information, but like the learning journey itself needs you to go out into the world, actually test the ideas and come back and get feedback. There needs to be a longer feedback loop for you to embed the information. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've stuttered over that. It's because I personally know, I don't know if you've heard of the 10-20-70 model for learning.
No.
So 10% of your learning is classroom learning. It's your traditional buy a course, edX, go to school, university, whatever that is. That's your 10%. That's where you learn. 20% of your learning comes from conversations, group coaching like this. This podcast is kind of learning, because we're both learning right now from each other. Having conversations like in breakout rooms, whatever that is, coaching conversations. Peer conversations about an idea, like meeting up with other entrepreneurs and having big conversations about things. That's where 20% of your learning comes from. 70% of your learning comes from fucking doing it, actually doing it, going out and doing the learning, building the engine yourself, getting your hands dirty, taking it apart, putting it back together. Like you don't build a Lego by standing, looking at the box and then talking about it. The only way you build the Lego set is to open it up, read the instructions. You don't read the instructions and the thing gets built. Do you know what I mean? And I think we're
watching YouTube videos about building a business isn't the same as building a fucking business.
Yeah. So it's a 10-20-70 model. So I know this instinctually, and I believe it, and I believe it in my own life, and I've seen it. And when I launch something, a community, I want to include the 10-20-70 model. I want the whole thing in there. It needs to be longer than a couple of weeks. It doesn't need to be a year. Probably doesn't need to be 6 months. I think 90 days, maybe 60 days, whatever that is. Because for that person or the people within my program, when I get around to launching it, I want them to get the 10% from the worksheets and the data. I want them to get the 20% from the calls and maybe peer being partnered with someone. But then I want the 70% feedback loop where they can go out into the world, do the work, and then come back to the 20% calls that we're on and actually get that feedback loop. So they're because you said, I wrote it down, taking action, not taking notes. And I was like, yes. And I think that's one of the things when I may be overthinking it, but this idea, I want the whole picture. I want the holistic approach. This information dumping that I see in so many places, like come join my 2-week, is it Maven? I'm not going to criticize them, but it's a great platform.
It's not a CBC. It's most of their shit is much more like a workshop.
Yeah.
Versus a CBC, yeah.
And it's while great and beneficial, and if you've got one of those, that's good for you and all the support. But I think as somebody who's a coach and as somebody who sees the whole coaching journey and the learning journey, and I've been open to that. I've been very. What's the word I'm looking for? It's my water. I'm not fishing that water. That's what I see. I'm very aware that that's what I want the whole journey to be. So it's something that I maybe have overthought it, but it's also something that I know that's vital if I want something to work well for me.
Well, so with coaching, so specifically like coaches who are interested in a CBC or some sort of live course offering. Okay, I'll speak to that because you're kind of on that cusp, and I'm sure other listeners are probably curious. One thing, and I talk about this in my own coaching course, but if you approach creating a live course as a coach versus an educator, you have a huge advantage because educators, because like I used to teach college classes. I used to teach intro psychology and some other shit. I taught like 15 or 16 courses. I know how academia works. Traditional educators are all about info dumping, and maybe occasionally they'll do like some little exercise that's just bullshit, like busy work basically. A coach, on the other hand, assuming you're a good coach, you are really good at asking like questions that help your client develop insight, right? Because why do people come to coaching? People come to coaching to develop clarity, strategy, and accountability.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm unclear on how to move forward. I know how to. I know what I want to do, but I don't know how to do it. So it's strategy. I know what to do and how to do it, but I'm not doing it. Accountability. Those are the three that I can think of. The only fucking three things anybody comes to coaching for. Okay. Yeah. So your job primarily is, how do I facilitate clarity, strategy, and accountability? That's your fucking role as a coach. Okay. Because like, you know, like a coach versus a chiropractor, right? Like coaches, like you don't touch your clients. Yeah. So like everything you do is just verbal. It's just talking and listening and asking the right questions, identifying patterns, making observations, right? That's what you do as a coach. So if you take that same coaching mentality to developing a curriculum, you can say, okay, where do I want the people in my, you know, my students, where do I want them to be by the end of the full course, and where do I want them to be at the end of every session? And then you reverse engineer it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So for example, the formula, the soft formula I use that's been super, super powerful for people in my own CBC. I do a 2-hour session. I do two 2-hour sessions a week for 5 weeks. So 20 hours, 10 sessions, right? That's a huge ask from people, right? Obviously there are recordings up so people can watch it, and there's a community so they can interact asynchronously. But for the live portion, I say, okay, I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A so that everybody leaves every session with exactly what they need to move forward. Yeah. So I leave tons of room for Q&A. So the first hour, that is like the quote unquote, like the core curriculum hour. Yeah. So I say, okay, this is where I want them to be by the end. So here's how I structure it. The first 5 to 10 minutes is me introducing a concept. So I'll introduce the 4 horsemen of fear, the most common limiting beliefs that hold people back. Here's what they are. Here's how they show up. Then I'll say, okay, here's a prompt of like, which horseman are you currently struggling with? What is your strategy to overcome it? Whatever. And I'll say, you have 5 minutes for a solo writing session. Yeah. So I give you the prompt, and I give you 5 minutes to collect your thoughts and really put them on paper. Okay. Then I send you to a 15-minute breakout room with 2 other people. So there are 3 of you total. And you have either the same prompt or a similar prompt that's basically like share your shit with other people. This allows you, because some people are just more verbal processors, so it helps them to talk it out with other real people. It allows you, if you're struggling, you're getting feedback from 2 other people. They can ask you different questions. They can help you work through it, and vice versa. If somebody in your group is struggling, you can offer your own support and insight. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you've learned a concept, you've clarified your thinking individually, and then you further clarified it in a small group. That's at the half-hour mark, right? 10 of content, 5 of solo writing, 15 of a group. And we come back and we do the same thing again on the second part of that concept for that day, right? Here's a concept for 10 minutes, 5 writing, 5 solo writing, 15 group. That's at the hour mark. So for an hour, I'm only really talking for like 20 minutes. Yeah. And it's mostly introducing some shit and then asking questions. After that, it's like, all right, guys, that's today's session. You've developed a fuck ton of clarity. You have strategies. 1, here's an exercise for you to work on between now and next session. So you're applying it. Mm-hmm. But at this point, Q&A. We have an hour plus of Q&A. What the fuck are you curious about? What are your questions? What do you need help with? What are you struggling with? Smart. What did you learn? That's it, man. So like, honestly, like it's really weird for you as the instructor because you're like, fuck, I'm not doing a lot. Because like when they're doing these solo sessions, you're just sitting there. When they're off in these fucking breakout groups, you're not doing anything. So it seems like nothing's happening. But man, every time when people come back, they're like, holy fuck, like I wish we had more time. That was such a great conversation we were having. Yeah. That's what you want. You want people to want more, right? Yeah. In a good way. But for a 2-hour session, I'm only prepping 20 minutes worth of shit. The rest is them applying shit or asking questions that, you know, you can't really prep for Q&A, right? That's it. That allows me to maximize my job is to facilitate that transformation, and that is my mindset as a coach. Educators are trying to info dump and force information down your fucking throat. I, as a coach, am trying to facilitate transformation. That's all the fuck my role is.
Yeah. I love that breakdown. I love the way anybody listening to this has just got a masterclass in how to run a coaching session. I'm like, yes, you're saying yes so many times, but I love that because you literally have touched the 10-20-70 model all in one go, because you've got the self-writing, you got the group writing, you got the Q&A, you got the information. All of it's being touched, because that self-writing part is the person on their own doing it themselves, and that's where they get. And then they go in and with their own information, they go into the group bit, and they have the paradigm shift, and then someone will ask a Q&A later on, and they might even get an even bigger paradigm shift because they hear somebody else with a different perspective. So,
and then they have the exercise after the session that they actually apply something and have like a deliverable by the end of the next session.
And they have the exercise. So it's a great loop. It's a great feedback loop. It's very I love that. So yeah. How much do I have to charge you for that information?
But that's it, right, man? Like, if you're trying to develop a live course, like, honestly, because, like, you know, tactical laziness kind of shit, like, I'm a lazy motherfucker. Like, I'm trying to be as effective as possible. How can I not even just minimize my workload, but how can I maximize their transformation while also minimizing the effort I need to put in? Because honestly, man, like, when it comes to live courses or any kind of course, most people make the mistake of saying, I have to teach everything that I know, period.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with coaching early on. People think I need to tell them everything I know.
Yeah.
They don't care. Yeah, they don't care about the 100 things you know. They care about the one thing you know that can help them. Forget 99% of like, dude, there's tons of shit I would like to teach people in the CBC, but it isn't relevant enough to warrant putting in.
100%. I have the same thing. It's like I will go back to the 7 exercises that I talked about, what I give all my clients. So little short 10-minute exercises, so you can spend an hour with them or 30 minutes. But most people, you can quickly get an idea for 10 minutes. But there are 4 exercises in there that seem to be the one that really stand out. But there's always one that there's. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There's 4 of them that I've noticed stand out. But everybody has one that stands out for them, whether it's open loops, whether it's finding their why, whether it's gap in the gain, whether it's fear setting. Those are I've got a couple of other in there, but those are the ones that really stand out for people. I've had people say, like, "Oh, that one really made me feel like this is the one for me." And it's usually the one with the highest percentage is open loops, because people have too much going on. But it's having those exercises in a way that then allows me. I have hundreds of exercises that I could give to my clients. But if I know the client is dealing with this specific problem of open loops or of overwhelm, all the exercises, all the book recommendations, and all the stuff that we talk about, it's about that problem. Having a cookie cutter information dump, I'm going to take you through 10 exercises as part of my 10-week program, it's bullshit, because 5 of those exercises might not even be relevant to that person's current situation, and you end up like teaching them stuff that's just a waste of fucking time. And I'm not about wasting people's time. I'm about solving people's problems and getting people results. So even though I have 20 or 30 exercises built in my bucket of coaching, there's sometimes I only even get to 5 of them with a client, because we're focused on one major issue that is the major issue, which is the big domino for their life. And then we just keep circling around that until we get clarity. They get the result they want. They pay me their money, and then off they go to a happier life. And everybody's happy. I'm happy. They're happy. It's a beautiful story.
Well, and it is scary going from one-on-one to like a course model, like a live course, because you're right. Like by developing a curriculum, you kind of solidify what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously the Q&A gives you a lot of leeway. Like that gives me a fuck ton of leeway because sometimes somebody will ask me something and I'll be like, oh, I was going to put that in, but I didn't. Here's the answer. Right. And if that same question comes up multiple times, well, then maybe I need to put that into the core curriculum. Right. Like it's always, an evolution.
You always have the stuff in the back pocket. Like I always bring stuff in. So it's you've got that. You've got your set stuff that you're going to give people, but then you have your magic trick. You have your toolbox. You have your bag of magic where you can be like, oh,
exactly.
I have this.
That fluidity.
You're adaptable because it's not like you're like, oh, next page, next slide. Is it the Further Bueller's Day Off where it's like in the classroom? Next slide.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
So, but because again, like specifically to you and then anybody curious, like if you're trying to develop this into a curriculum, what I did, I said, okay, the framework I use with one-on-one clients initially is like a 5-step framework.
Yeah.
So we start off by clarifying your core value, and then I go through what's called the GOLD model, right? Which is goals, obstacles, leverage, and direction, right? So what are goals that act as stepping stones that progressively get you closer to this life aligned with your core value, whatever that is? Cool. What obstacles could get in your way or have historically gotten in your way? Cool. Now we know where you want to go, why you want to go there, and what can get in your way. Well, what leverage, what strengths and resources can you tap into to leverage to overcome those obstacles, right? And then direction is just like, how do we develop a plan that keeps you on track and adaptable, right? That's all it is. It's very simple, right?
Yeah.
Nothing fucking rocket science. So I was like, oh, 5-step framework, 5-week CBC. Each week is a theme related to my one-on-one framework. But I sat there and I said, okay, what are the exercises that get the most people the best results and that people love? Yeah. Let me start by making that's like the wire framework of well, let me plug those in and see if this fills out the curriculum. But also let me see if they all go together and logically these are the missing pieces that these people need to achieve that outcome, right? Because creating a course is like building a bridge, right? This is where the person comes in at. This is where they ultimately want to go. Your course gets them there sequentially. Yeah. That's it, right? And that's what I did. Is like, is this relevant? Does this actually get them closer to? Because what you'll find, man, you've probably settled on like, these are the people I'm most effective at helping. These are the things that are most effective at helping those people. Yeah. You probably already have a solid first draft of a curriculum as is.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree with that. I do. It's my free course, my little performance course. It's sitting there, ready to be used. But yeah, no, I love it. No, it's great. A fantastic conversation. You and I could probably sit and talk for hours about this. Some of the listeners are like, yeah, okay, cool, that was fun. What's next? But yeah, to get what's next, I'm gonna, because we've been talking for nearly an hour, I think, or so. So I gotta ask sort of 3 questions just to sort of wrap up the podcast, and they're not quick fire, but we can take time over them. But the first one I'm going to ask is, what do you think is currently slowing you down or standing in your way from you getting to your next success? You talked about where you want to go, your new cohort. You've dropped some fantastic wisdom on how to produce a CBC. With that said, What's standing in your way? What's that big barrier currently in your performance origins?
Yeah, so I mean, probably just top of funnel, right? Which is the age-old obstacle for people, right? And let me preface this: this is not a call for anybody to DM me about growing my account or what the fuck ever, right? Let me preface with that. Don't do that. I get plenty of that shit and I never respond, okay?
Yeah, I don't think those people are listening to this podcast.
Okay, cool. Because I'm mostly active on Twitter and it's everywhere on Twitter. Yeah. But I haven't cracked the code, quote unquote, on growth, right? All my accounts are fucking small. It is what it is, right? Yeah. I think I'm still under 5K on Twitter. I'm trying to get back into the YouTube thing. I've got 180 subscribers there. Around 1,300 newsletter subscribers, that kind of thing. So that is a priority because that's math, right? As long as you're building a value, an intentional audience of people who are high caliber, and you're providing them value over time, the math works out. There are conversions to sales of something, right? that is my primary focus, is how do I increase top of funnel, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to work on, I'm less concerned with social media. I want to grow those, but algorithm changes are a bitch sometimes. I am most interested in growing my newsletter specifically. So
Yes.
all of like my call to action on all my content is just to subscribe to my newsletter. That way you're getting long form content, you're getting good content, that kind of thing. We have a better dialogue. You can respond. It's way better. But the other thing I'm getting into is YouTube, right? I love writing. I hate making videos. Just the whole process, right? Like fucking with cameras and lighting and mics and editing and uploading all this shit. Fucking hate it. But, if I send out a tweet within 24 hours, you're never going to see it again. If I upload something to LinkedIn, it may last a week. But with YouTube will literally put your video in front of people 10 years later.
Yeah.
Right? Like every day. Like not even including like AdSense and shit. Like just straight up the algorithm actively works for you. No other social media platform does that. So when I'm looking at, because, like I've spent like hours on a fucking Twitter thread that went nowhere, like 3 likes. I'm like, my time isn't spent here, like isn't best spent here. With YouTube, even though it'll be slow growth at first, that is the most effective use of my time when it comes to creating content. Now, I'm kind of taking a similar approach to the way like Dan Coe, I know I keep shouting at Dan, it's just Dan knows what the fuck he's doing more so than, he's further along on his journey than I am. And I just, I want to be like Dan when I grow up. But Justin Welsh is also, even though like I'm older than Dan, I want to be like Dan when I grow up.
I'm the same. I want to be tall and blonde and handsome and smart and everything.
Right. And Justin Welsh, like some of the other people, like they've kind of figured out this like hub and spoke model. So for me, I start by creating long form newsletter issues. They're on my website as standalone articles. And by creating long form content, one, obviously you can clip it out to like tweets and shit. Yeah. But that is a soft script that you can talk through for YouTube. Yeah. So even though even when I'm writing, I'm basically creating a soft script to just turn on the fucking camera and talk around it, right? So that's why like my main focus is creating the long form content, getting people on my newsletter, but then taking that content and putting it on YouTube so that YouTube is trying to find an audience for my shit. That is my biggest hindrance, is that top of funnel.
We're in the same place. All my podcast episodes are, I use my newsletter, my email that goes out. And again, I'm struggling with that. I've got about 2,000 subscribers. I don't really focus on that. I'm trying to like lean more to grow that, because I feel like after being on Twitter for 2 years, I should probably have 5,000 to 10,000 on an email list. And I'm really starting to switch over to that as my main focus. But because of Dan Coe, because of his process, when he started on YouTube, and even Justin Welsh's spoke idea as well as Flywheel, if we go back to... is it Jim Collins, Good to Great? He talks about the flywheel. I think it's that book. Or is it Stephen Covey? Sorry, too many. General productivity dude in a book once came up with a concept. And I write my newsletter, which goes out to my email list. And that eventually turns into a script that I have on the screen that allows me to talk for 10, 20 minutes for my podcast. And I put those podcasts, I've recently started putting those podcasts on YouTube, and I've got about 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, because I used to do like product reviews. But my YouTube has now got like green lights again. It's like it's starting to grow, because those podcast episodes are now there for years. And the thing about podcasts is when somebody finds a podcast, they're more likely to actually listen to 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes quite quickly on 2-speed. Even with the people, even when they find your YouTube channel, they'll do the same thing. They'll watch a whole bunch of your videos because like, oh, I like this guy, I'm going to watch a bunch more. Where you don't really get that on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, or maybe TikTok you do a little bit on Reels. People start watching all your videos, going through that. But I 100% agree, and I do the same thing. But I know that every single podcast episode that I release, eventually I will retitle that and I will do a video. So I will use the same script, but YouTube isn't going to catch me because I'm going to have a different title, and it's not going to be a podcast episode. It's going to be me talking live, and I eventually will get back onto YouTube, and every single podcast episode, every single newsletter that I have will become the script for a long form podcast. And we're in the same place, 100%. I grew, and I'm going to be very brutally honest with myself. I've got 68,000 followers on Twitter. I grew a lot of that off bullshit platitude threads. 10x to productivity by 10 o'clock in the morning to make your 10x better by 10x.
10x.
So I got the 60,000 followers last June 2022. We're in March 2023. I've only put on 8,000 followers in the last year nearly, because I do not tweet like that at all anymore, because that is just not my clients are not reading those types of threads. They're not.
Well, I think that's a really painful thing that a lot of people have realized too, is like, because, early on I did some of the Twitter growth things. I took some of the courses on it. And I also realized that the type of people I was attracting were not the type of people I wanted to attract.
Yeah.
So when I changed, and, we both know how that works, and, people who are prominent in that niche. Yeah. But I learned that, like, man, a lot of the people that are coming to me and following me, like, I don't want to be associated with you, and I don't want you in my tribe, right? You're not in my tribe. If this is the signal I'm putting out that's attracting people like you, my signal is fucked up. Yeah. Right. So when I switched how I talked, all those people unfollowed me and left. I was like, cool, this is the right signal now. Right. And it's really, man, like, I know people with 200,000-300,000 followers across socials making nothing. The only thing they can do is either make a Twitter growth guide, or they can get people to sponsor their content, because otherwise they can't monetize their audience. So there's just, because the audience they created isn't engaged, doesn't care about their products or something else. And that's a really hard thing to navigate around once you realize that. But yeah, like, that's my thing. Like, I have a super small audience. Like, algorithms change all the time, which again is why I like the newsletter, because there's no algorithm there. As long as you can make it through spam and create a title that people actually want to fucking click on, you got them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but you're doing well, it's rough.
You've got a very, in my opinion, you've got a very committed following. You've gone up. It's taking me a little bit longer to come around to the 100 fans or 1,000 fans. I knew about the concept, but now I'm really focused on that, and that's where I'm releasing my free stuff, and not just doing a free PDF. Hey, I'll DM you this and I'll send you an old Twitter thread that I made into a Notion doc. Like, come on, there's too much of that going on. I legitimately did a 3-hour-long video course and went, here's actual fucking content that will change your life if you go through it. And it would if you did it. So that's what I believe in, and I'm trying to build that tribe, that 1,000 followers or 1,000 fans or 100 fans, whatever it is, because that's all you need. This idea, like, why do these old rock bands from the 80s still tour? Because they make a fucking killing when they do, because they have 10,000 fans in every major city that has 1 million people, just to fill up these small locations, and they make an absolute killing. You don't need to have 300,000 followers on Twitter to make a very healthy 6-figure business. You do not need that. Yeah. So with that said, I'll let you jump in.
Just tackle one more thing real quick. A lot of people think they're building a brand when they're focusing on branding. Branding is the aesthetics. Yeah. Oh, you got to get your Twitter header right. Oh, you got to get your fucking your hex code for your primary color on your website. What font do you use? Like, what's the container width for your text boxes? But that's what when people talk about, oh, I'm building a brand, they mean branding. Yeah. What your brand is, especially personal brand, your personal brand is your reputation. So the next time you think about, like, oh, I'm trying to build my brand, don't use brand, use the word reputation. And then see how that changes how you approach shit, right? Because that's how I think about it now. If I'm going to tweet something, I'm like, is this going to help or harm my reputation and the person I want to be known as? That's changed everything for me, man. So now it's like, yeah, my course, the production quality is shitty, or, my Twitter banner isn't quote unquote optimized or whatever. Like, but does this speak to the reputation I'm trying to build? Is the content valuable? Are the ideas valuable? Am I showing up genuinely and with intention? If so, the branding elements, I can change that later.
Yeah, 100%. I think that there is too much emphasis on this optimization, where if you actually just show up and be and I hate the term provide value, but what I mean provide value is authentically help people within the area of interest that you have, and you're doing it in a way that you actually get results, and it's not bullshit, and it's not fabricated discord. Like, look at all the results I got, look at this DM I got. It really, you look at this Stripe clip. But there's too much of that bullshit going on. It's one of the reasons why I actually do video interviews with my clients, because you can't fucking fake video interviews. And I think it is literally provide value, but know what that value is, because provide value, again, is a dumb shit term, but it's like, well, what are you authentically trying to help people do? What are you actually trying to shift in your own life and in the lives of the people you're trying to help? And then do that daily. And again, you've mentioned about what I do daily, because it's one of my core beliefs, is do less dumb shit and life is easier. It's almost like I heard Tim Ferriss say it once, and I can't remember the guy whose quote it is. It's like, hard choices, easy life; easy choices, hard life. I look at it as, the more dumb shit you do, the more shit you'll be in. So the less dumb shit you do, the easier life is, the less shit you're in. So it's a similar kind of concept, but different. But yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to jump in on that and explain that, and I think that's where a lot of people get Twitter wrong. I'm no genius on it, but I make a living from Twitter, and I definitely don't go after the platitudes or the numbers anymore. And I don't want to say I'm making more money than people, because I don't compare myself, but I make a healthy enough living to live a life where I don't have to go to a corporate job. So let's leave it there. Pay the bills, keep the food coming in, and the Netflix account going.
Exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'll wrap up the podcast with a couple more questions here. These ones are a little bit shorter, but this one I always like to ask: what is a contrarian view that you have from your own industry or with self-performance itself? Where do you push back against the norm?
Yeah. So not that I'm necessarily like in the quote unquote productivity space, and I never claim to be a productivity guru, because my life is very unproductive by traditional measures.
I would agree with mine.
But one thing I think just offhand, because I didn't prepare an answer, a lot of people, other than the branding thing and how like your brand is your reputation, a lot of people get fucked up. There is a difference between being effective and being efficient. Most people are so caught up in trying to be efficient that they forget how to be effective. All these fucking shit of like, here's my morning routine. Here's 10 things to 10x your fucking whatever. Here's how I use Chat GPT to come up with 15 viral Twitter threads. Buy my workshop so you can get the prompts. Like, not that I'm trying to throw shade, but that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Some people are genuine. Most of the time it's a fucking grift. Or at best, you get mediocre results.
Yeah.
People are so caught up. We're like, I read, 70 books this year. Cool. Did you fucking do anything with that knowledge, right? I am not looking at how can I do 99 things in a day or 100 things in a day. I'm saying, how can I gain the clarity to identify the 3 things that fucking matter and do those 3 things and accept that I'll never do the other 97.
Yeah.
Right? Which things move the needle the furthest? Which things actually progressively move me closer to a life aligned with my core value, help me reach my potential, build a fulfilling life and business, achieve self-actualization, whatever the fuck term you want to put to that ideal version of who you can be and the life you are capable of achieving, whatever the fuck term you want to put to that. What is the shortest effective path to that? No hacks, no secrets, no shortcuts, because all of those are all fucking bullshit. Because any hack that works isn't actually a hack. It's a fundamental you just repackaged.
Yes.
Like, you're not a computer programmer. Quit using the fucking term hack. Like, I have an article that is called How to Hack Your Brain for Peak Performance. I gag every time I fucking read that title because I hate that title. But everybody who read it was like, keep that title. Don't change it. I fucking hate it. But it's one of my most popular articles. It is what it is. But I fucking hate the term. Okay?
Hacks are hacks.
Yeah, and even that article is like basic operant conditioning from behavioral psychology. So it's just fundamentals. I just call it a hack, right?
Yeah.
But hacks aren't fuck hacks, secrets, shortcuts, all that. Be effective. Fuck being efficient. You're not a machine. You don't need to be a machine. You need to figure out, what life do I want to live that I am capable of achieving, and how do I do that effectively on a day-to-day basis, right? So you and I talked a little bit, I can't remember on or off air, but like with working out and shit, right?
Yeah.
You can try to find the most efficient bodybuilding, hypertrophy fucking exercise, and 10 of these and 12 of those and this machine. Or you can say, what are the most effective exercises that I can knock out in 30 minutes 3 times a week? Yes, if I have more time, I can do more, but what are the most effective ones? Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, don't be efficient, be effective. That is what most people fuck up.
Yeah, that's my favorite Peter Drucker quote is, there's nothing, oh my God, I've totally forgotten it, but it's there's nothing worse than doing something that never needed to be done in the first place, or something along those lines. It's like it's efficiency. Efficiency is doing something right, and effectiveness is doing the right thing. Those are 2 Peter Drucker quotes I've just pulled out of my ass that are great. But yeah, no, I love that. It's like, and also Josh Wakin's book, The Art of Learning, talks about that a little bit, where he was talking about, you know, when he's learning a skill, he's like, well, what is the core fundamental part of the skill set? What's the core fundamental? If I learned the basics, what's the actual, you know, the core center that allows you then to spread out and do all the other things? Because I think a lot of times when it comes to productivity, and again, I don't like being lumped in with the productivity or optimization dudes. You know, the dudes who are in their 20s and single, living on their own, who talk about optimization. I'm like, you don't, stop it. It's like life.
Or how to get 6-pack abs. I'm like, you were born looking like that. Shut the fuck up.
23-year-old. You should have 6-pack abs. Like, for fuck's sake. So it's like that's. Though I don't love that whole like that kind of optimization bullshit. For the reasons that you're saying, it's there's so many confusing areas that people get stuck on the hacks and the shortcuts and the bullshit, but they don't actually look at the fundamentals, the why, their purpose, their fears. That's the fundamentals of productivity and performance. If you want to perform better, go and sort out your engine. Far too many people take their car that's broken to the car wash, and then they go and get it all looking clean. Still can't get it out of the car wash. It's like, you gotta go to the mechanic. And the productivity hacks for me is the car wash, the BuzzFeed accounts, the Twitter threads, the bullshit. That's the car wash, baby. I'm a mechanic that works at the garage. Come see me. This is where I'm gonna go and get my hands dirty. I've got my overalls all. We're getting dirty, baby. And that's where I agree with everything you said.
Well, and if you think about, like, and I'm a big fan of, like, figuring out what is the underlying issue, what is the underlying thing you're trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
With productivity, the whole productivity space, the underlying thing is, how can I make the most of my time?
Yeah.
Fundamentally. Well, the way you make the most of your time is you identify your actual fucking priorities, and you focus on hitting those priorities, aka you focus on being effective, not efficient. You're not trying to do 100 things quickly. You're trying to do the 3 that fucking matter. Period.
Leverage, baby. I'm saying the word baby too much. I don't know where that's come from in my lexicon over the last 5 minutes. It just popped into my head. Okay, that's awesome. Absolutely brilliant. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. The final question, which is a very quick fire question, and I think I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you had the opportunity to make everybody in the world wear a graphic t-shirt for one day, a printed tee for one day with a message on it, what would that t-shirt say?
One of 2 things: either memento mori, obviously,
obviously,
or in English, you're gonna fucking die one day.
You're gonna fucking die. Yeah. I love it. I want that t-shirt. You're gonna fucking die. I love it. Absolutely brilliant, Corey. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking to you, my man. It's not the first time I've had a conversation, but this one's recorded and as the 45th episode of the SPS podcast, the Self Performance Strategies podcast. But yeah, to wrap up, tell everybody who's listening to this, all the beautiful people who have hung on this long to the end of the podcast, tell them where they can find you, where you're at, where's the best way to get in contact with you.
Dude, thank you so much. I'm down to come on anytime again. CoreyWilksPsyD.com. If you just Google Corey Wilks PsyD, CoreyWilks. My doctorate is a PsyD. It's a doctor of clinical psychology. So just Corey Wilks PsyD. I'm on Twitter.com. You can find all my shit there. Corey Wilks PsyD.
Yeah, I'll put all your stuff in the show notes. Corey, absolute pleasure. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Nope, that'll have to be for the next episode.
For the next episode. Love it, man. Love it, man. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon. Make it a good one.
Thanks, man. Take it easy.
That was the 45th episode of the SPS podcast. If you want to check out all of Corey's links, they're in the description below. But also, if you want to hit me up on my socials, that's at Steve Timoney on Twitter. That's at SteveTimoney on Twitter. Or you can slide on over to the main website, see my Pro Accelerator program, all the other podcast episodes, and my newsletter posts, and you go over to stephentimony.com to see all that, and that's stephentimony.com. I really hope you enjoyed this Performance Origins deep dive, and we will see you in the next episode. Make it a good one.